So I hit record and then we can get cracking.
Oh, straight into it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything you don't want to talk about?
Um, there's nothing I'm sort of trying to promote at the moment, so it's what would you like to talk about?
Well, firstly, I mean, hello everybody. Thanks for coming to Discover Energy Work. Um, Today I've got David Harker, and I don't really know the best way to introduce you, David. So I'm going to do like, okay, David, how would you introduce yourself?
It depends very much who I'm introducing myself to.
Right. So imagine there's people interested in energy work, psychic things, psychology, um, could be even
Well, excellent.
spirituality. I mean, I'd like to say that people want to hear about other people's experiences.
So my most sort of specific and intensive training is in remote viewing. I'm also a Western ceremonial magician, an experienced meditator, and general dabbler of interesting things, transpersonal, non-local, and anomalous. So
Wow.
I've tried my hand at various different modalities, but remote viewing, which for people who don't know, is not functionally distinct from other psychic modalities, but is just a particularly nerdy way of doing it. You know, you have a set protocol within which you do the work so that you
Mm.
can ensure that no imagination or trickery has come into the process. So that's my main one, and then you run up against all sorts of odd phenomena of consciousness working in that territory for any length of time. So that's really piqued my interest to
Mm.
um, yeah, explore what's really going on here. Not that I have a good answer for that. So,
You know, I always like the Discover title in Discover Energy Work because like you can discover it, but I don't think we've got any answers. It's like explain energy work. I think we'll leave to someone else. Um, so I totally get it. So where did you start? I mean, like, were you like a kid that grew up sort of saying to parents things that were sort of weird and unexpected, or where did this all
oh
begin?
no. I had a few what I would now look back on and say perhaps those were anomalous kinds of experiences when I was a kid, but I just wrote them off. I grew up very much in the sort of conventional Western mindset of materialism, and I went a science and engineering route um, because
Can you
that was.
remember? Can you cast your mind back to
Oh,
when you were
yeah. I mean,
young
I had
and
a sort of visitation experience after a family member died, and I had a couple of out-of-body experiences,
so how old
but
were
they were
you
quite
when that
brief.
that first visitation experience? Do you remember?
It was just a sense of presence hovering about in the bedroom while I was trying to sleep. And I remember being quite frightened and saying, "You're freaking me out. Would you mind going away?" And it did, and that was the end of that. You know,
So how old were you? Were you like,
how old was I? I don't know, perhaps 8 or 9.
okay. So you're aware
But
of it, you
certainly in my
freaked
teens,
out.
there was nothing anomalous going on then. I really would have sort of drunk the materialism Kool-Aid and assumed that if it couldn't be described in a science textbook, that it couldn't possibly exist. And I didn't actively reject this stuff. I just sort of de facto assumed that it must be wrong or nutty or something, and
Mm,
never
mm, mm,
properly looked at it.
mm.
Um, and then in 2018, I had a spontaneous awakening kind of event, which I think I might call a cessation now, where are you familiar with Zen koans? You know, the impossible puzzles. Um,
I to say I'm familiar is might be taking it too far. I know the idea that
but
you give somebody you could say something that should you might say stop the logical brain from working, so a different kind of functioning
yes.
appears.
So it's like when you get the spinning beach ball on your computer or the blue screen of death for the intellect and the ego.
Hmm.
You can sort of crash the intellect if you if you bash it against an impossible problem hard enough. And I was lying in bed one night, and I had a few questions that I just couldn't work out the answers to. Um, and one of them was, what on earth is going on with geopolitics? Because my first child had just been born, and I was thinking, how on earth do I sort of predict the future and plan for the future and navigate this world sort of in long term way? And then I had a couple of other things that I just couldn't work out. And there came a point when I just sort of had this sudden surrender to the notion that, wait, that all of my models of how the world works are actually useless. They don't make any good predictions. I simply cannot work this out. And so my intellect sort of surrendered. And then suddenly I had this sort of
Oh,
cessation, blue screen of death experience. And when that happens, the awareness becomes aware of like the big C consciousness as opposed to the little c individual consciousness. You're suddenly aware of everything, no longer bounded by the self. And it was about half a second. It was practically nothing. There was no trumpets for heaven or, weird visual phenomena or
mm,
shining lights or anything like that. It was just a change in awareness. And I had no idea what it was. I've got no spiritual background, no spiritual training. So
mm,
all I knew for absolute certain was that sort of a cat had escaped from a bag that could not be put back in, and that I would absolutely have to investigate this and find out what it was and pursue this, which I did.
wow.
And coming from the sort of science engineering background that I do, I was looking for a way to approach this empirically because obviously I hadn't done any spiritual practices. I certainly didn't have any discernment with a capital D, any of the sort
Mm,
of psychic, spiritual sense of discernment which you get at a certain point. And you go out on the internet looking for the answers, and you find an awful lot of people who are very happy to sell you the answers, um,
yeah,
which I was always a bit dubious of, quite rightly.
yeah,
But so I said to myself, I need an empirical way that I can test this experimentally. I need an experiment that I can run in my house for free or for very cheap that can just verify something about how I've understood reality is wrong. And this is a better way to look at it. And I didn't do very well there. I spent months looking at all the conspiracy theories and all the crazy stuff that I'd written off as obviously false without really giving a proper thought to. And,
mm,
came out of that going, oh, some of those look a bit, like there's a grain of truth in there, but none of them really shed any light on
mm,
what am I missing about understanding reality? And then there was a YouTube recommendation for Russell Targ's banned TED Talk.
mm,
It's not banned, of course, because it's on YouTube. You can see him doing it, but it's a very clickbaity title where he talks about the US military psychic spying program. And I watched that eventually, after I'd run out of all the other crazy videos to watch. And I thought, well, this is nuts. This can't be right. That's
mm,
impossible.
mm,
But it was a empirical experiment that I could do. Right, you can just search online for remote viewing targets. You can go and find them. There's websites with thousands of these things for you to practice. Write down the number, see what popped into my mind. So my very first remote viewing session was just a few scribbles on a post-it note. It really was practically nothing, and I did it because I wanted it to fail so that I could feel smug about how certain I was that this was impossible. And of course, it didn't fail. It was a good enough match that it left me going, "Ooh, I think I need to repeat this experiment." That's uncanny. So I did, and I think I did about 50 of these things before my worldview really caught up, because it was quite a big change to my worldview
Do you
to sort
remember
of
what
admit
that
the idea
first
of
target
non-local
was?
awareness.
Do you remember
Sorry?
what the first target was?
Oh, yeah, it wasn't a particularly good target, actually. It was a painting of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Oh my goodness, what a terrible target.
I'll show you. Hang on. Right.
Another reason I say it's terrible, I mean, can you explain why it's a terrible target?
Yes, because firstly, it's not. We don't know exactly what the Hanging Gardens of Babylon looked like, so it's not necessarily a representation of a real thing. And really, with remote viewing, you want to look at the real thing. You don't want to look at the remote viewer is not describing a photograph with pigment on a piece of paper or card. The remote
Yeah.
viewer should be describing the actual thing. So you give people a photograph as feedback, after they've done their session, you show them, here's what you were supposed to be describing. Now go and see, did it match up? How well did you do?
Hmm.
Here we go. Here's the, we can get that up so the camera can see it there. Um, so there is the image. Whoop. It is a painting.
Yeah.
And there is the session. Usually it's just a few lines. It's just chicken scratch, really.
Yeah.
But I looked at those and sort of graphically they match up with sort of the
Yeah.
the steps, stairway, and the sort of the moon in that picture that you can't really see there, and clouds, and then there's a big box where the tower is in the background. And sort of graphically speaking, there's all these different elements in there which actually match up perfectly with the composition of the painting, which was surprising. There shouldn't be, right? By
Right.
chance.
Right. Yeah. Um, I find it fascinating. One of the things I find fascinating about remote viewing is the fact you could get somebody to do a, you know, uh, visit Gotham City. You could actually get them to remote view Gotham City, although it's an imaginary place, and they
Yeah.
would they would actually hit the target. And that must, I think that for a lot of people, it's like, well, this is fake. If you can go to an imaginary place. Um, but yeah,
Well, I don't think that argues for remote viewing being fake, but it certainly um, highlights how careful we need to be in interpreting remote viewing data.
yeah,
Um, because just because you can remote view something accurately doesn't mean that it's real, right? Um,
absolutely.
I
I've seen there was one of these psychic tests, and they said a crime has taken place, and they were testing a psychic, and they'd made the crime from I think in Americans call it Clue, we call it Cluedo in
oh
England,
right, right, brilliant.
where it wasn't it was asking
So
a
it was
psychic to about this crime, and it was on a game, and of course, you got to go, well, it, that's nothing that a remote viewer would necessarily have as many problems with as a psychic if you were told a crime had taken
well, you,
place.
you have lied to them as well and told them that it's a crime when it isn't. So
It's
that's
it's a
not going
crime
to
in the
happen
game. It's murder, yeah,
because
in the game.
well, if you ask someone to describe a crime, but the thing that you've pointed them at is not a crime, they're going to be filtering their perceptions through the notion that they're looking for something criminal. So you're
Right,
rather going to make their job a bit difficult there.
right, right. It was one of those ones where you'd sort of say it was very much the Amazing Randy kind of thing,
Hmm.
which was set up so that you didn't have a chance to win. It's interesting. Uri Geller sued him and won. Um, so the Amazing Randy thing was just, I don't even know what he was trying to do, Amazing Randy. Um,
Well, I think he was trying to discredit Psy without giving it a fair chance. There is a whole book about this uh, called Randy's Prize,
oh,
which, if you're interested in pseudo-skeptic debunker stuff, you could read. I'm not that interested in it. I have to say,
I'm
I'm more
I'm not.
interested in
I'm not.
practicing
Yeah.
the psychic skills and the magic and whatever. It's much more interesting than reading about people who can't deal with it and make a career out of that.
So I'm trying to know where to go because you look quite young to me. I can't quite work it out,
It's
but
good lighting.
yeah, it's good lighting. Um, but I mean, you this is in 2018. This is 7 years ago. So were you a
Mm.
magician? Were you doing like ceremonial magic before that?
No, 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 no. I, well, at the point that I had this cessation event, absolutely no spiritual practice, nothing. Everything I picked up since then. I had no frame of reference at all, and just I've tried lots of different things as just coming at it from a standing start. I'm going to try all these different systems, try all these different methods, and see what works, see what gets results.
Hmm,
So I don't have a traditional background to inform me or sort of fall back on
difficult, isn't
at
it?
that
Yeah.
point. Yeah, it was just starting from absolute blank. So yeah, I toyed around with Golden Dawn magic for a bit, and there's some useful stuff in there, I guess, which I've certainly been informed by it, but practice-wise, I just don't like dressing up. So these days, my magical initiation system of choice is the Franz Barden system, which is probably more up your street, I think, because it's a bit more inner alchemy, um, and a
Oh,
bit less dancing around in robes.
what did Franz Barton write? I'm not sure.
Initiation into Hermetics.
That's it, Franz Barton. That's I knew the name. Yes, um yeah, I've just really been involved in Tao practice and uh Taiji and Kung Fu really. So um and it is actually a philosophy in motion. It's like a movement philosophy, which I find interesting. Um, but yeah, doing this energy line strengthening that I did for you
Hmm.
last time. Um, I found
Yes,
that
that's really got me thinking. I'm really interested
mm,
in that now, but I'm trying to resist the temptation to ask you all about it because I'm
no,
supposed
you
to
can
be the
ask me
one
if you
answering
want
the
to.
questions today, aren't I?
No, no, I don't mind. I mean, yeah, I I think we can just say, whatever comes up is okay. Um, for me, at least, I found exactly the same thing. Like you've got this awakening, and then at the time there was no internet, so I went and bought loads of books, and I found that it was very heady. It was very very in your head, you know. Whereas
Hmm.
what you want is to sort of get out of your head in so many ways. Um, and then I tried Zen meditation, and that wasn't necessarily really for me either. Um, and and then I did archery, Japanese archery, so Kudo,
Oh.
which was really nice. Um, and again, I found like um, magic. It's very it's very in your head. Whereas what I'd learned from this Dao master in China was he just made things available to you. You just suddenly realize things, which is kind of, you know, like if you wanted to become aware of acupuncture points in other people's bodies, then he would see if he could open that for you, and then you just like feel it, yeah,
Hmm.
spontaneously. So it was much more, you can say, like they say, heart to heart transmission of
Hmm.
knowledge. So it wasn't about talking, yeah.
Yes.
Um, and then um, I he did acupuncture, which was one of the ways that he'd tune your consciousness. So he'd find the points on the body. And then I found the Yun method, which was putting energy in the center line. And it was so simple, and I could feel it straight away working. Um, and that was connected to insight, and the insight it's a bit like remote viewing. You get knowledge, but unlike remote viewing, you don't need to know, is it real? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it correct? You've got your feedback from your remote viewing. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I could say anything, and then
Hmm.
if I was on the at least near the target, I'd have an effect. So I got drawn down that way. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I can feel I think I've got an idea of what you mean of being drawn down the road of uh, like a million different, very heady, um,
Hmm.
like
Well, I wanted to avoid those because I thought they're sort of almost by definition, they're not what I'm after. I want evidence. I don't
mm,
want to take somebody else's word for it. So I want to be able to validate this for myself
mm,
because, all I had to go on was this experience that I'd had
mm,
that I had no frame of reference for. And then, not long after that, I tried out remote viewing and that worked, and that was a bit mind blowing. Wait a minute, awareness is not bounded by space or time. So I had to throw out all of my received wisdom about how the universe works and space time and atoms and molecules and matter and consciousness and everything. Um, so I was approaching it from I have a lot of air in me and not much earth. Um, I'm a very sort of intellectual, up in the pie in the sky sort
Mm,
of
mm,
person, and no amount of walking around barefoot in the woods seems to be redressing that balance.
mm.
So I was approaching it from a very engineering point of view, trying to sort of experimentally dissect the thing, rather than to take on board a worldview from somebody else that says this is how it is, this is the one great truth, to just experiment phenomenologically and see, well, if we do this, what happens?
Mm.
And just examine it with a bit of curiosity because it does, the more fundamental the truth you're trying to grasp, the more slippery it becomes, doesn't it? So that, I'm not I don't think any of us should be too attached to the notion of the truth, should we? Because it's a bit of a false
Yeah,
um,
it's
or an
fascinating, isn't it?
impossible goal.
Yeah. I'm I sometimes feel it's the elusive obvious, it's like that's a good description of it. It's like right there, but because it's right there, it's hard to see. Um, I'm curious, you've gone through this awakening. Were you married? I mean, like, did your partner think he's lost the plot, or
Yes, and yes,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and then it had, that it was such a big change for me that it caused really significant psychological destabilization.
mm,
You've come across the dark night of the soul
mm.
as a part of the insight cycle.
Yeah, what
I
happened
thought that I
there?
thought it was just an arty-farty thing that happened to poets and things, but it turns out it's not.
Mm,
It's a function of the sort of spiritual growth cycle, right? If we think of the ego is a response to the world you find yourself in, and what we call the way we know that is the worldview, right? We have a certain set of unchallenged subconscious beliefs about how everything works, and then our ego uses that as its point of reference in order to react to the world. So when you smash up the worldview by pulling out all of these things which you've just discovered to be incorrect, such as the nature of consciousness and time and space. And, an awful lot of stuff had to come out of my worldview. So you can really think about it as literally pulling the rug out from underneath the ego. So the effect um, is existential. It's basically small pieces of yourself dying as the sort of ontological substrate upon which that false self content is constructed has just been nuked, been annihilated. So
mm,
you could, I suppose it's a little bit like when people have very challenging experiences using psychedelics or something.
mm,
They experience a great deal of discomfort in a short period of time,
mm,
but the end result is quite a lot is achieved in terms of personal development, but
mm,
it was wildly unpleasant, and it went on for a couple of years, and I gave up my lucrative career, nearly lost my marriage, although now that's probably better than it was before. But it was a very difficult time for everybody around me and for
mm,
me,
mm, mm.
and it absolutely sucked, and I would never have chosen it. I
Right.
would never have chosen to go through that. So I suppose it had to be foisted upon me by whatever part of the universe it is that does the foisting upon us. Um, so yeah, it's sort of I'm not the person I was that happened to.
I forget. I think I said it in my last interview, one before last, is psychic is the new gay. Yeah. Nobody's going to choose it. Nobody is going to choose it. It's not the lucky card that you're drawing. Yeah. Um, and to a certain extent, you polarize people. You
Mm.
go, yeah, this is my experience. And people go, "Ugh," like, oh,
Mm.
you're a weirdo. I mean, they just make a load of assumptions. Oh, you're a weirdo that blah, 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 I don't know, tree hugger or whatever. And it's like, okay, yeah, but do I stay in the closet or do I say, no, I
Mm.
experienced this. Yeah, you don't have to, but I do. So, yeah, I mean, um, I think that I don't know if that gay stigma thing is quite as much, as present so that
I
people could
suppose it depends
understand
where in
it.
the
But
world you are, but I
mm,
appreciate the analogy, definitely. I mean, they talk about witches being in the broom closet, you know.
mm,
Uh, but yeah, the various things have conspired to coax me out of the psychic closet and go, no, hello, I'm studying this stuff and it's real and it works. And I think one area where that analogy does break down, though, I think it holds very true for the sort of social stigma and othering and being weird and
mm,
misunderstood and what have you. But everybody can just learn this stuff. You know, remote viewing and psychic skills more generally even are trainable skills. And people don't need to be true believers or have 20 years of meditation practice to develop these things. I do workshops where 45 minutes, an hour, many people will have an experience of non-local awareness, of their own non-local awareness, which is verifiable. You know, that they've done that themselves, and there is no way that anybody could have cheated. So they know it's true. You know, it's not, and it's a very different experience from watching somebody else do it. You know, if it's on the internet or on TV
mm,
or in a book or something, oh, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Perhaps there was fraud, perhaps there wasn't. It's always in this sort of slight state of superposition. And then when you have direct first-hand personal experience of it, and it's set up in a way where experimentally you just couldn't have known what the target possibly was. There's no way for the information to have got to you unless you did something psychic. It's really powerful for people to have that experience, and it's
mm.
very, very attainable as well. I mean, like very attainable. Remember my very first remote viewing session on a post-it note. There was no preparation for that. I didn't even want it to work. I wanted it to fail so I could feel smug, and it still worked. You know, this is not rocket surgery, as they say. Getting good at it takes a great deal of practice, but anybody can get results good enough to prove to themselves that this stuff is real.
I like the analogy rocket surgery. I think that's got to be my favorite. But you know what I think is, I got to say, I think going, how can I say, not wanting it to work but still trying it. Yeah, it's that openness. Like it's almost helping you. Like I'm going to get in my psychic zone and like I'm going to be all psychic instead of like this doesn't work. Okay, let me
Mm.
try. I mean, it's so. I would say it's so zen, it's so nothingy. The
Yes.
the the whole process is not the room starts shaking and the plates in the cupboard start clattering. It's just like, what was that? It like, did that just
Yeah.
happen? Did I just have that
You've
experience?
you've pointed to a really common difficulty that people have when they're just getting started, and they say, "What do I do?" Nothing. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
Well, how do I do it? You don't. You know, don't... and you find yourself giving those stupid Zen-like answers, which, when you haven't sort of worked out how it works, it's really frustrating when people are there going, "Oh, just do it." And you're going, "Yes, but how?" "Oh, there is no how. Don't worry about it." And
Mm.
it takes. I suppose you've got to work through the frustration of that to see what those people mean, haven't you? And then it's obvious, that there isn't any method. And we can use method. Method is useful training construct, and method is useful. But I think a nice lightweight analogy for learning this skill is it's like learning to wiggle your ears. I can't tell you how to wiggle your ears. I could maybe give you some instructions that would help you to identify which muscle group it is on your head which wiggles your ears, and a way that you could sort of try to practice perhaps to refine the ability to do that. But ultimately, this is an internal discovery about, it's a discovery you will make from observing inner phenomena that we don't have a shared language for. I can't point to that part of your inner experience. There's no way to refer to it from that inner thing from out here. So yeah, we have the sort of finger pointing at the moon thing, I suppose.
Right.
Did that make any sense?
Yeah, the finger pointing at the moon is was the analogy you're making is Buddha's pointing at the moon and everyone looks at his finger.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I think that's what he's showing. But um, yeah, I'm curious now because you did those 50 targets
Mm.
and remote viewing is not cheap. I wouldn't say it's cheap to study.
Oh, you can study cheaply. You can spend as much as you little or as little as you want.
Okay,
Um,
tell me about that.
but
That's interesting.
yeah, I didn't spend a single penny for the first 2 years that I was learning, at least,
Cool.
because I still wasn't quite admitting to myself that I was willing to take this seriously, and I was feeling a bit embarrassed about the amount of time that I'd spent on this thing that I couldn't
Hmm.
necessarily see a purpose to. It just seemed like a silly
Wow.
little obsession,
Y-
you
You
know.
know, you and Taz, you really impressed me because you've got like this thing and you're like a dog with a bone. Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. You've really like focused on it. And you did it for 2 years because Taz was saying like he had very little information and was there for years.
Mm.
It's quite impressive. So,
But it's
so what were
such
you doing for
fascinating.
2 years? What were you doing like stage ones or did you
Well,
not
I
even
wasn't
have
doing
stages?
staged anything necessarily. You don't need a remote viewing method to do remote viewing. That post-it note that I
Of
showed
course,
you, I
yeah.
just was like, go on, then what do I see? And just I vaguely, there's a process akin to scrying or automatic writing or something. I was trying to make random marks on the page, there you go. That'll do. That's perfectly valid. What makes it remote viewing is the protocol that, particularly being blind to your target. And then that there is a specific target. You record your perceptions while you're blind and then you get feedback. It's a laboratory protocol. And it makes available that really fascinating, that inner territory I was talking about is a really fascinating and valuable place to explore. So, one of my favorite quotes about remote viewing is from John Vivanco, who very nearly became a Zen monk, interestingly. And then at the last minute, his teacher said, no, 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 go and be a remote viewer, and kicked him out of the Zen center, pretty much. So, um, and
Hmm.
he says, remote viewing is a process of self-discovery, and data collection is just a side effect, which is very true, I
Hmm.
think.
Yes, that is interesting, and looking at things as a process of self-discovery is very much in line with this self-cultivation, you know, trip that I've been on. Um, but so would you say that you've changed through remote viewing? Like literally the remote viewing has changed you as a person?
No, I don't think the remote viewing has changed me. I've been on my own spiritual journey of sort of spiritual personal development, and remote viewing has been a useful part of that. I've certainly learned a lot about myself and what it means to be human, and it's helped me navigate confusing situations by giving me better, clearer access to my intuition. But um, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's changed my mental equipment in the way that going to the gym will make your body stronger.
Yeah, no,
You'll have
but
stronger
I'm about
muscles.
stories. I love stories. So, I mean, I know this could be quite personal, but you said it's enabled you to, um, I think, did you say overcome like difficult situations where you gave you more
Well,
insight?
everybody's had a gut feeling before, right? Oh, I shouldn't go down there, I shouldn't be involved with that person or something.
Yep.
And we learn sooner or later that if we ignore that gut feeling, we get in trouble, and that we're better off pay attention to it, hadn't we? And doing something like remote viewing, but I'm sure practicing other psychic modalities as well, remote viewing, just my background, will really improve your ability to decode the content of those intuitive feelings. So it's where one person would have a gut feeling and they can translate it to mean, ooh, something bad, don't go there. I can peel the layers off the onion of that and be very specific about what's going on here and why. And it gives me a great deal of confidence to sort of set boundaries and act rather than having self-doubt, to
It's
just
it
act from
it's
intuition or
I have the experience of the trickster, yeah, where you get information and you think, oh, this is real information, and it's not. So I'm
mm.
curious about that because I feel like I hear this go, wow, this is the answer to all my problems. I'm gonna get this feeling and I'm gonna, go through it and I'll know what's going on. So have you had experiences of the trickster, as it were?
Oh yes, lots.
Hmm.
And it's
We do, don't
the
we?
trickster is a phenomenon, right, rather than a particular being.
Okay.
Or I suppose there's more than one phenomena that we can label the trickster.
I think
Um,
so. I That's why I say okay because I'm not
hmm.
sure. I think that's
Well,
a
I
way
think
of seeing it.
maybe they're all the same, or maybe we can treat them all the same because there's certainly something external to us in psychic space that's more like the traditional trickster spirit. There's things like that which will come and just mess with you, and they just want attention. They're trying to, if you find the people who've just started a YouTube channel and they're channeling aliens and they're going to give us all these messages with all this useful stuff, and it's waffle. I dare say they're channeling something that's not got very much wisdom, but has got an insatiable appetite even for attention.
Hmm,
So there's that sort. But then the inner sort is generated by ego and fear and self-doubt,
hmm,
um, and all those sorts of mechanisms where we trick ourselves.
hmm,
Um, and both of them are sort of, I think they're very, very similar. Um, and if you train in remote viewing, there's nowhere to hide from being wrong and from being tricked by any sort of trickster.
hmm, hmm,
If you allow yourself to be tricked, you will miss your target and you will be wrong. But the growth potential there is when you get your feedback, when you find out what was I supposed to describe, and you
hmm,
compare it with what did I describe, and then you look at, well, what are the differences here?
hmm,
What's
hmm,
what's gone wrong? And then take yourself back to, all right, when I was writing that particular bit that I've identified as having gone wrong, what was going on inside me there?
hmm,
And you can pretty much just recreate the mental state that you were in, as long as you get on with this relatively quickly after you did your session, you're going back into it with feedback, going, how was I feeling when I wrote this incorrect data? And how was I feeling when I wrote this correct data? What was the difference in my inner state? Were there
hmm,
any little thought processes or self-doubt or imagination or something going on in there? And you just simply repeat that thousands and thousands of times, and you get to notice trickstery processes, noise processes, and we're still wrong. Even the best and most experienced
yeah,
remote viewers miss
yeah,
sometimes, and nothing
I
is
think so.
100%
Yeah,
accurate.
yeah. I think Joe. I like Joe McMonagle. I quote Joe McMonagle. Of course, he's not the first person to have said it, but he says, "We don't know what we don't know." Yeah. So and it's such a beautiful statement. I think it was Seinfeld that says you can always sound really smart if you repeat something a second time. Like I know what I know, or we don't know what we don't know, which is kind of funny, yeah. But I'm still very curious and curious in a very positive way about like doing 2 years without spending a penny on remote viewing, and you're
Mm.
doing a target a day, a target a week.
Well, it depends because at the beginning, I had there was a part of me that was so sort of skeptical and embarrassed and sort of poo-pooing of this whole topic that I didn't think a remote viewing session deserved a whole sheet of paper. So I would limit myself to one or two post-it notes. I know it's insane, isn't it?
No,
The
not
amount of
really.
trees that
I
I've
love
cut
it.
down in the pursuit of this passion now I've used a lot of paper. But yeah, it was amazing, isn't it? So the first 50 or so, and I still have them somewhere, I think, up in the attic. It's a big pile of post-it notes all stuck together. You know, it was, oh, I'll stick it on the heap. That was another good one. And it was more sort of experiential. There is a lot of stuff on the internet for free. There's a website, remoteviewing.link, which if you go there, it's just links to all sorts of different practitioners and articles and
Mm.
movies and books. And there's so much stuff out there for free. There's almost a problem of too much information, really, and
Right,
obviously it
right.
being of variable quality and appropriateness for any given individual. But there's a lot of stuff, and there's communities of people that you can go and meet and chat to and work with, and experienced remote viewers out there who will just answer your questions. You don't need to pay a lot of money and go to a
Mm.
special school and do intensive study. And because I wasn't ready to do that. I hadn't sort of had that conversation with myself to say, no, actually, this is really interesting and it is important for me personally to pursue this and explore this territory. And I actually want to get world class at this and see how far I can take it and see what I can learn from it.
Mm.
So at that point, I got one-on-one mentorship. I think it was
Oh,
in
so you
Rocky, the
didn't do a
film with the
class, you
really
went to mentorship.
yeah, I didn't do a method class. I mean, I learned some method in the process of having mentorship, but um, there is there's a distinction between the method and the remote viewing. Yeah, there's what you're doing and how you're doing it. And if you want to get really good at it, it's not about learning methods. It's not about learning controlled remote viewing or this or that. Right? They're useful training systems, and I think it's valuable to learn loads of them. But you can think of them as like martial arts or musical instruments or something.
Mm.
They're training wheels, but they will teach you, they point at a fundamental thing that you're doing, but they're just something to kind of walk you through the steps that are going to introduce you to that reality, I think.
Mm. Mm.
And people get stuck in them. I think is a real problem. People get stuck in, they do this method or that method and it works quite well. And they never separate out the method from the psychic functioning. And this happened to me too. I identified this sort of, and it absolutely shocked me that I had conditioned myself that I couldn't be psychic without poking a piece of paper with a pen, because that was the only way I ever did it, you know?
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. So because I feel a little bit that it does happen to a lot of people. So how did you get out of that?
Um, well, I got a whole presentation on this, that was
Is it
my,
on the remote viewing dot links?
it isn't, no, it's, hopefully it will be
Oh,
available
right.
for free at some point. It was a conference presentation from the International Remote Viewing Association last year, I think. Um, But anyway, yes, how do we get out of that? I'll condense that hour into 2 minutes. I
No, don't
think
take as long as you
first of all,
like. I mean, I don't know.
to learn more than one method, because then you begin to triangulate on, okay, what is arbitrary stuff. One method says you must use this language or that jargon, write this over here, draw a line
Mm,
underneath
mm,
that.
mm, mm.
And when you're learning, you don't know what's important and what's not important.
True.
What is this method really doing to facilitate you to do this thing? And what's just arbitrary made up stuff. So learning more than one method is great. Um, and the way I sort of broke out of using paper was by visualizing myself using paper, because that bridged the gap between I need a physical pen, poking a physical page, doing this method
Mm,
stuff.
mm,
So I just started visualizing myself doing the method and then visualizing myself doing and practicing breaking the rules of the method as well. We don't do stage one, two, three, four, blah, blah, blah. Don't do it in this set way. Just
mm,
do whatever you need in the moment,
mm,
and think of the sequence of stages in something like CRV as useful when you're learning. It's really useful to learn the early ones before you start learning the later ones. And it's useful to go through them all every time you do a session because it forces you to practice things like what does it smell like? What color is it?
mm,
Thousands of times. which builds a firm foundation, we might hypothesize, for doing higher level, more abstract, more complex things. Um, so, yes, visualizing, doing the session, breaking all the rules, coming up with a new method. I co-developed something that came to be called cowboy remote viewing with my friend Josh Floto, and we mixed chaos magic with the remote viewing protocol with sort of traditional magical evocation stuff from the Western tradition.
Mm.
So there we had an operator performing a magical evocation, which is where you summon up a spirit or a deity or whatever it is you want, but into your space in order to have a conversation with, as distinct from invocation, where you try and bring that energy into yourself. With evocation, you're keeping it at arm's length. You're not sort of mixing yourself up with it,
Yes,
right? So,
I think that's probably advisable.
yeah, well, no, yeah, well, and that's a different conversation. So,
Well, I'm ready for it.
one at a time.
Yeah, certainly.
So we were doing this sort of thing, but within the remote viewing protocol. So the operator was blind. They had no idea who it is they're going to speak with. All they knew was it'll be something, someone, some entity which you can have a conversation with.
Mm.
So we actually did lots of fictional characters. The very first one was Doctor Strange, the movie wizard. Um, and I was doing it, and I described, oh, there's a guy here, and he's holding what looks like a huge, shiny serving platter or something. He's got a big, round, shiny thing, like a mirror or something. And you know, the movies have the graphics where they're sort of drawing all the sparkly, magical sigils in the air. And I said, there's an audience here watching, and they're sort of seeing their reflection in this big, shiny mirror that he's holding up. How very interesting. And then, you know, people were asking questions, which I was sort of relaying and asking this, being that I could see, and it was answering in character, you know, and we were having a conversation with something which was known to be fictional, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you can perfectly well have a and this was within the remote viewing protocol, right? So I was completely blind to the target. I could have been speaking to a human or a deity or a dead person or a myth or a Marvel character, anything, right? I didn't know. I was just passing on questions and relaying what I saw and the answers, and it worked perfectly. So we did a lot of those. Ended up doing a lot of stories. Um, Quite a lot of deities, random, interesting sort of people and things from all around history,
Mm.
um, which we did with no paper, you know, because remote viewing is very often sitting at a desk writing pages and pages of this sort of stuff
Yeah, yeah.
up. Um, Magic is much more closing your eyes and being in a bit of a trance state and, you know, busting some pentagrams or whatever.
Mm.
So it was ditching some of the dogma and um, methodical sort of plodding inflexibility of the methods, which make them good training systems, but don't necessarily do anything to make them good operational systems. So yeah, it was kind of slowly breaking more and more rules, which allowed me to decondition
Love it.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and I now sort of I advocate that for people who have learned a couple of methods and sort of practiced really well, because you can get stuck in the method. You know, the method becomes your reality box of remote viewing, that
Mm.
you don't look outside of the ways you've been taught to write things down on the page being
Mm.
equivalent to your actual abilities of your consciousness. And yeah, if you chuck that out, you can do a lot more, and you can do it much quicker, and you can
Mm.
have a lot more fun as well.
Mm. Mm.
So my remote viewing work is much, much faster and more enjoyable than it was when I was training now, because
Mm.
I skip out what I don't need to get the job done.
Mm. That sounds really fun.
It was.
Are you training people in this stuff?
Well, not really. So yes and no. You know the trope of the person who walks up the mountain to find the teacher up on the mountain, and they say, "Go away," you know, and then they come back, "Oh, please, no, go away." Yeah, I'm like that guy. I will have told you to go away several times. Um, I'm not trying to teach. I'm not trying to sell teaching services. I will begrudgingly occasionally take students if I have the intuition that they need me to be their teacher, but it's not my business.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it's
Okay.
sometimes that's what you have to do. Um, I do group workshops because I think the the impact for society at large, a way that I can most effectively both apply my very sort of niche skill set and also make the world a better place is by giving a larger number of people a direct experience of the nature of their awareness
Mm,
and that it is non-local, right? So instead of running, oh, you can pay me $2,000 and you can come on this 6-week course and I will teach you these methods and you'll learn structures and get a certificate and then,
mm,
you can go and put your certificate on the wall and say, well, I don't do that. I think that's dull. And it's a well-served area, right? You can get remote viewing train. We don't need more remote viewing method trainers. There's loads. Um,
mm.
they're doing a good job. It's useful for people, but we don't need more of it. It's sufficiently um, catered and
Served.
niched.
Yeah. It's, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Get it. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I will do like one-on-one mentorship for people if they want to work 2 hours a day for a year and are insane sort of type A personality type people who are really willing to bust their ass.
Mm,
Um, but that's not really for beginners because I don't think you can know how willing you are to do this work if you haven't already started,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I totally
And
agree. I mean, I suppose when I was learning human method, because I learned the remote viewing, it all worked. It was all fine, but I it just wouldn't draw me. Yeah.
mm,
And when I was doing the yun, um, it was I can make a difference in somebody's life in a second,
mm,
and definitely the more you do it, the better you get. And it's like literally trying to find, I would say almost, it's trying to find a method that hooks you, where you go,
mm,
I want to get what is there. I'm curious. Yeah. And I love that. I think it comes from um, particularly internal family systems in the psychotherapy area, where Dr. Richard Schwartz talks about the the self, like the core energy, being activated by curiosity.
mm,
Yeah. So the self is expansive, is peaceful, is loving, is all of these wonderful things, but it loves curiosity. It loves to
mm,
like, what's that all about? And if you can hook somebody with that, I believe this like really our core psychic ability is from the deep self. It's like
mm.
this deep deep knowing or yeah. Um and yeah. But I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated in your idea of the cowboy remote viewing.
Well, it isn't a method. People want it to be a method. They want teach me how to do it, and it isn't. It's more of a sort of ideological statement about the use and abuse of method in training. And it's saying to people who've already learnt these formal structured methods, just stop and push the limits more, break these rules
Hmm.
and really explore what are you personally doing rather than how are you doing it using this method and differentiate those two. And explore what you can do that they told you couldn't do because a lot methods say a lot of prescriptive things. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, that's impossible. You have to do this before you do that.
Hmm.
And the more of these dogmas you test, the more you discover them to be outright false. They're not true. And some of them come from the military sort of context of the development of this stuff.
Yeah.
Some of them are really helpful notions for training. The very high level, accurate sort of data that sort of, oh, I'm just going to describe the thing perfectly accurately right now. That's probably going to be your imagination, you know.
Hmm.
So it's a good idea to avoid that stuff when
Yeah.
you're beginning and
Hmm.
focus on, can you just tell me whether it's the ocean or the desert
Yeah.
before you start getting fancy? So there is value there, But when you reach a certain level, they can go from supporting you to holding you back. It's like having training wheels on the bicycle. It will help you ride the bicycle, but it will also prevent you from riding the bicycle in a more advanced way. You,
Yeah,
you can't take a corner fast with training wheels on because your bike won't lean into the corner nicely, right?
yeah. There's Robert Anton Wilson had this
Mm,
thing of catmas, which I liked instead of dogmas, because a dogma is, always true, and a catma is it's true sometimes, but not true all the time, and
oh,
you can
I
rely on
like
it
that.
some of the time, but then again, some of the time you really can't rely on it. And it's just such a funny twist on the cat dog story, and
Mm,
generally things are catmas. Yeah, they're true, but they're not true all the time. Yeah. And that's much more of a funny way of opening the mind, of saying
mm.
it's a
I shall
catma.
have to use that.
Yeah. Um, and I'm also fascinated. I know we're probably sort of going a little bit right up to the mark.
I'm good for another hour. I've got an hour and 6 minutes before my next thing. So as long as I have time to get a coffee before my next call, I'm good to go as long as you want.
So were you, that's fantastic. Will you talked a little bit about an area um, which I'm interested in, which I'm also cautious about, which is let's call them, you say, invocation and evocation and so on.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm I've noticed that sometimes with people when I'm doing the energy work, that they will have interference, which will be, well, let's call them, when I say entity, I don't say it's a spirit, I don't say it's an alien, it's just say it's a consciousness that's there,
Mm. It's
that's sort
something
of,
that we can demarcate as.
yeah,
I
that's right.
think
I'm
there's an internal
demarcating as
family
something.
systems term for these. They call them sort of unattached something or other.
Burdens, UBs in
Burdens. Yeah, yeah.
business.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, those. I mean, I would call that entity attachment. Some people describe those as astral parasites, which is rather a more loaded
Yeah, exactly.
terminology for them, which is nevertheless perhaps correct, but perhaps not. Phenomenologically,
Maybe
there
we're the
are
parasites
external.
after all. So,
Sorry?
just maybe we're the parasites actually, we're the astral parasites. Well, we don't know.
No, 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 we're not. That's
No, I mean, well, maybe we're living off this planet, we're astral parasites living off this planet. I mean, I look at the big picture, but anyway, I don't.
well, the
And
difference is creativity, right? Are we contributing nothing and draining resources? That's the definition of a parasite, isn't it?
okay.
Something that sucks its host dry and gives nothing back? Or are we part of the ecosystem where we're being creative and constructive and using our creative energy to give back more than we consume?
Yeah, I don't know because I don't know. It depends on the point of view, doesn't it? If we're gonna,
Hmm.
I mean, if I'm gonna be like really philosophical, it's like I don't know. It might not be giving anything back to me. The parasite might be not be giving anything back to me, but it might be giving back to its community or to the earth or yeah. But okay,
I
I
think
think
that's
it's
stealing. But then, that's the taxation is theft argument, but applied to the astral plane, isn't it? So I think this debate could.
yeah. It's not going where we wanted to go. So let's let's
Yeah,
uh
let's get back to entity
well,
attachment.
we were actually just saying like, oh, parasites, like such a loaded term, let's avoid it. So, but
Hmm.
which I think is true, because the way I deal with them is really I think lovely, not unkind. Um, but I'm curious about you, so I want to hear how it's worked for you. If you've come across things, if they've
Oh yeah,
come through
yeah.
the session and been
The
difficult,
I
or
think everybody's affected by these things, perhaps with the exception of the odd enlightened master living up a mountain somewhere. But I think all even remotely normal people are affected by this phenomenon, and
mm,
it very often isn't a particularly big deal. It's a mosquito bite
yeah,
in many areas in the world, such as the one I live in, thankfully, is just going to be itchy. And almost certainly it's not going to transmit any serious disease.
mm,
So while you could say, well, that's parasitism, it's nicked some of my blood, I don't miss it. it doesn't really matter. And I think that's how this phenomenon manifests for most people.
Mm,
Where people tend to come up against it is doing inner work, personal development work, shadow work, where people are really delving down into their subconscious to, uh, how is it? Ken Wilber puts it, clean up, grow up, something. That one when you're really taking responsibility for your inner content and going in there and addressing that and accepting it and exploring it and
mm, mm,
making the unconscious conscious.
mm,
So when you do that, there's an awful lot of clearing out. Oh, that time that my teacher yelled at me when I was a little kid in school and I didn't do my homework, and
mm,
there's all of
mm,
that stuff that everyone has. And then there's maybe well, obviously your bigger traumas if you've got any of those to deal with, which is bigger. There's all this mundane stuff we've got to clear out, but at some point we start peeling enough layers off that onion that we'll start running up against things which are not they're just not ours.
mm,
And
mm,
often those will manifest as a, a personification, and people confuse them to be a sentient, first class individual being with free will, like you or I feel that we are, whether we are or not. Because you very often see a face. A really diagnostic appearance of these things is to be jump scared by them, where they go woo, and
okay.
this is commonly seen as a sort of black and white photo negative kind of appearance, where there'll be pale light image will suddenly appear right up in your face, looking directly at you,
Mm,
and it will evoke a strong emotional negative response. And the idea of this, I think, is just to scare you,
mm,
um, really.
mm,
But what's interesting about those appearances is that they are not inherent to the entity. This is content from the subconscious mind, from your
mm,
own subconscious mind. So
mm.
those scary movies that you watched on TV when really you were a bit too young to watch them as a child, those frightening images that got lodged somewhere deep in the subconscious mind.
Doctor
You know,
Who. I
yeah,
blame
well, yeah,
Doctor
yeah, yeah.
Who.
And I've seen a whole array of these things that vary in the silliness of their appearance, and they can be
Mm,
distorted human faces or aliens or monsters and any scary thing.
mm, mm,
But if anybody has that experience, if you can manage not to poop your pants and just regain your composure, it's all right to be startled, but don't be scared, because they don't really have any control over you whatsoever. They're not powerful just because they're spiritual, just because they're
brilliant.
non-physical doesn't give them the
Mm,
slightest leverage over you unless you give it to them by emotionally reacting and believing anything they say. Because if you really engage with these things as if they're individuals, you will end up in psychosis. You will end up completely
mm,
with a twisted, warped worldview. That's a condition that sometimes is called entity obsession, where
mm,
it's a really interesting failure mode of the psyche. It's really messed up. It's a sort
mm,
of hypnotic, down the plug hole sort of
mm, mm,
effect on the worldview that slowly twists how you perceive things until you become kind of slightly unplugged. And it's actually kind of similar to an abusive relationship,
mm,
right, between humans, where
mm. Yeah, that's
one person
interesting.
will manipulate the reality of
Mm,
another in
mm,
order to bring them under control. You sort of
mm,
go down the drain into this alternative reality. And I've made the observation that astral entities or parasites, whatever you want to call them, are kind of like the non-physical manifestation of the cluster B personality disorders, right?
okay.
All of the ones that you don't want
Fascinating.
to live
Yeah.
with. Um, so yeah, I don't know. That probably says more about people who suffer those personality disorders than it does about the entities. I don't know which way the causality really runs there. But anyway, in terms of dealing with them, the way we pick them up is sympathetic resonance, right? The idea if you have two tuning forks the same pitch, if you ring one, the other one will start to vibrate.
Yeah.
If you have any mental blind spots, so practically speaking, this is trauma. Anything that is repressed, any event where the feelings were more than you could cope with in the moment, which is not necessarily big T trauma. We're not talking about getting run over or murdered or something. It
Yeah.
can just be that time that your dad yelled at you
Mm,
and you were frightened. and it was just you just couldn't cope with that level of emotion, and
You,
it gets sequestered somewhere in the subconscious mind.
mm, mm,
Um, and it's like its own little tuning fork, these entity phenomena, they have their own issue. They're kind of like a detached bit of this kind of mental informational content that
mm,
when you dismantle these things, you find they're all energized by a burning need which is unmet. For example, I want to go home, or I want to feel anchored, or I want to feel love or connection or closeness or intimacy or nurturing,
mm,
or I have to control people in order to be safe, or all of these sorts of things. And I think very often they are created from people having very, very stressful experiences, ruminating or being stuck in a situation where they got no choice but to just constantly mentally focus on this, whatever unpleasant thing is going on for them.
mm, mm.
And there's a lot of emotional energy, and these things just sort of they pop off, And anybody who's in a state of emotional overwhelm where their kind of immune system is a little bit I'm not able to keep other people's mental content out at that moment. So the kid that's got overstimulated or is unable to cope emotionally because they're a small child, and it
Mm,
doesn't take a
mm.
lot to emotionally overwhelm a small child, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This is one mechanism of generational trauma, right? This stuff is contagious, like a cold. So you have this sort of sympathetic resonance thing, and it'll just go in there. And you can also find other people's content. I mean, people call this like oh, past life memories. It's my past lives. I remember from my past, and I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Is this really a well-supported proposition that it's yours? I mean, whose? What are you talking about? You
It's
weren't
nice
you,
to
so how
hear.
does this belong to you?
It's nice to hear another psychic because I've got this thing about past lives. It's like I I get all the evidence, but it's not proof that it's yours. You could be remembering somebody else's story,
But what does it
and it
mean to
feels
say
like
that it is
yours.
yours? What constant sense of self is there? There isn't one. You've got a completely different identity.
Right.
So I mean, it doesn't. If I remember something from a past life and say it's mine, well, it doesn't belong to David, does it? No, that doesn't make the slightest bit of sense.
Hmm.
So when I say it was my past life, who is referred to by my? Because it's not the ego. It's just.
Yeah. I mean, I I'm not trying to like how can I say not knock the I don't know the traditions that say we're getting our teacher back, he's coming back for another life, or it's like
Well,
yes,
that does seem to
I'm
happen. In
I'm
fairness,
I'm not well
I'm not
I'm not
arguing against
knocking
that
it.
either.
I'm just saying there are other explanations. And by the way, you do what you want. No, you buy the ticket and you can enjoy the ride, but there are more than one explanation. And of course, it's yeah, I feel like yeah, it's sometimes it's a little bit I think it's far more useful, if you like, to be here now, who you are
Mm.
now. That's what you're supposed to be learning. And I never forget this chap in Germany saying, "Oh yes, a friend of his wife's gone off to Mongolia to ride with the Mongolian nomads because she had a past life there." And he said, she has no idea, going from German suburbia to like horse dung and, um, I don't know, big horse flies that bite you, and all kind, and living in a yurt with people that haven't well, no, that's not fair. I don't know how often they shower, but like, certainly it's like a completely different life. Yeah, there's no plumbing in the same way that we get used to and so on. So it's yes, I suppose it's easy to take those examples and make fun of people's life choices because in some cases they literally say it was just it was a an idea that you have after two whiskeys, so two whiskey
Mm.
idea. But yes, so I'm refreshed to hear.
Mm.
Uh,
Well, my approach to all that stuff, because we find that stuff within ourselves, but as you rightly, I think, point out, we can't attribute it. We can just observe that it is there, and deal with it as if, just the same as we would deal with stuff which we can attribute to our own lives. And you might have other people's perspectives on events in your own life
Mm,
or stuff that just you can't match it up at all. And you're like, well, I don't know any of these people. And maybe you'd have a feeling that, oh yeah, this feels like me because it's my point of view. But hang on, I'm a different sex, I'm in a different body, I don't recognize anybody here, and this appears to be a time period that's too far away to be, like it's just
mm,
all different.
mm,
And then there's also content which you're not even human or in a body. There's really odd stuff in there when you go digging through it. And I think we just need to relax and treat it all the same, and treat it with acceptance and compassion and feel any feelings that need to be felt, bring all
yeah.
that unconscious stuff into the conscious.
Mm,
But so I have meandered off here because our topic was actually entity attachment, wasn't it? Because that I deal with kind of psychotherapeutically in that I will use my sort of magical evocation sort of toolkit to get that thing sort of in a box, if you like, because they can be quite evasive and squirmy, which you can take as a metaphor for the difficulty of bringing people into direct contact with parts of the unconscious that they don't want to. I think you can approach this
mm,
without having to have a transpersonal worldview, and it still works. You can come up with metaphors which materialists can use, and they will be able to remediate this for people. I don't have that worldview anymore. I think this is balls out woo woo. These are independent sort of energy information things. But I didn't always think that. I came to think that because one day I treated this in somebody, and at the same time, somebody else got better. And I was like, oh, that rather puts paid to my theory that this is just a psychological construct that
mm.
happens within the individual. I don't think it is that anymore. I think it is transpersonal, but you don't have to. You can treat it just the same if you think of it as um, I'm going to show compassion to a part of myself that, I suppose this is IFS, isn't it? I'm going to show compassion to a part of myself that hasn't been accepted and integrated, which
Yeah,
is,
IFS is quite smart because they divide it into protectors and exiles. So the protectors, firefighters and managers. So the firefighters, if you go near them, yeah, and they're active, they can wreak havoc because they're prepared to do anything
mm,
to um, avoid the person experiencing that uncomfortable feeling.
yeah. So these are maladaptive coping mechanisms personified, are they?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
So it could be taking drugs.
mm,
It could be literally suicide. I mean, they can go to self-harm. They just like, we do not want to experience that bad feeling again, and we're going to save you from that. And then the managers are just like, literally like, whereas um, the firefighters are reactive, the managers are proactive. So they tend to be like, oh, I don't think you want to do that, and busy yourself with this, and so on. Just are great ways of avoiding experiencing uncomfortable feelings that are buried. And then the exiles are the only ones that can actually help themselves, which is quite good. I mean, he's got quite a nice model. It's like you engage with the exile, and you engage from self, which self for me is we find it in the center line. We find it in our center. It's this peaceful. I say the center of anything is a peaceful space. So the center of yourself is this peaceful space, and if you engage with curiosity, things can happen. So, and I'm always a little, um, perhaps unnecessarily, because I've had experiences of entities that have been very positive that have come along, but
yeah.
generally like invoking or evoking. Invoking is inside, or
Yes.
yeah,
Remember
evoking.
the in,
Yes, that's
you
what I
know.
was thinking. In
Yeah.
probably inside. So, um, and then just saying, okay, can you help? Evoking. Yes, I've had interesting experience of that as well. Yeah. Yes.
It's just my approach because I happen to have that skill set. You don't necessarily need to do it that way, but it's the quickest way to.
Well, how did you get the skill
Um,
set? I mean, that's not really
oh,
standard
by
remote.
practicing. traditional magic, Western magic. There's a whole bunch of medieval grimoires with step-by-step instructions for summoning angels and demons and things, which you can take as much or as little as you like from there. But it's a very well-trodden path, so it's an easy sort of energy current to jump in with. But there are notions like the circle of protection, the magic circle, and the triangle of the arch, which is where is designed to confine the terrible demon that you summon. And I'm most certainly not in the business of summoning terrible demons, but it's easy to fall back upon that language and that the power behind that symbology if I happen to need to imprison something which would rather not have a difficult conversation about what it's been running away from its whole life, but which I would rather like to get on and deal with in the interest of expedience. Well, we shall draw the triangle of the arts just in energy with my finger rather casually. In somewhat of an emergency situation, I did once draw one on my desk using a Sharpie. Um, but
Mm.
usually this is just an inner imaginative or energy sort of process. But the point is to get the thing by the scruff of the neck, where it will sort of realize that playing evasive games and sort of shape shifting and squirming around is not going to help. It's not going to get away or hide from you by doing that because these things are within our own energy information field, right? They have come to us, and it is a sort of universal ultimate truth that if they want to participate in within our sort of microcosm, our energy information area that's our dominion, ultimately they have to play by our rules. And the only reason that they are allowed to cause problems is because we're not aware of them.
Yeah.
It's absolutely as simple as that. It's Jung's famous quote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These
Mm.
things can only exist in the shadows, in our blind spots.
Mm.
So we get the thing, we get hold of it, and we walk it through. What's it been trying to achieve? What's it running away from?
Mm.
What is driving it? And we
Mm.
keep interviewing it until all of that content is out. And when you sort of pull all of that out at once, the there's a sort of cognitive dissonance quality, energetic quality, which dissipates, and the thing rather loses its charge.
Mm.
And you
Mm.
can feel when it does. And then I sort of say, well, would you like to go on and do something other than being obsessed with this thing, which you've now realized that you can't have anyway, and is a ridiculous, impossible goal that's just making you miserable, and that you've spent hundreds of years failing to achieve? How about playing a different game? Or just return to sort of source and go and veg out in universal consciousness and chill, or you could go and get incarnated or something. You could do whatever you want, but don't
Mm.
you think it would be a good idea to let go of all of the people that you're attached to and just go and find something a bit more productive to do? And if you have completed that process of getting the story out, of sort of making conscious the unconscious, I suppose for you and or for it, whichever way you want to conceptualize it, all of that cognitive dissonance, tension, energy is gone, and the thing will agree by its own free will. Yeah, bye. And you can feel them sort of just going woo, and floating off, and
So are
it
you having
relaxes
this
the whole thing.
conversation through the client, or are you having it in your mind with the entity, or is it in a
Either
remote
way,
viewing
I think
session?
it's
It's
more
all.
valuable to do this with people and guide them to a place where they can have the conversation and just pass it on with you, because this is
Mm.
not terribly difficult skill to learn.
Yeah,
But I think
agreed.
you can get into very dodgy territory if you just try to do this without having somebody there to kind of support you and hold your hand if things get a bit dodgy. Because I think, if you go interacting with these phenomena, you can get into a real pickle. And I think it's very uncommon, but potentially people can end up sort of in the mental hospital with
Mm.
being forced
God,
to take
yeah,
antipsychotic drugs because they think
yeah.
if they go to sleep, the lizard people are going to kill them, and that they're
Yeah.
actually, uh, uh, you can go completely mental if you muck around
Mm.
with this stuff. So it,
Mm.
it's not territory that I sort of recommend people to just go, yeah, I'll just go and explore that without having a teacher or anything. You have been warned. Don't blame me if you go and ruin your life by diving headfirst into this. But on the other hand, um, I think a lot of people have and do, and the universe will bring you into contact with this content at the point when it is time for you to deal with it. And some people, that will be because they're motivated to go to South America and take a lot of ayahuasca in the jungle and hope for the best. You know,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
will be brought into contact with this content in
yeah,
themselves, and
sure.
they will also potentially have a very difficult time dealing with it.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
it might be quite easy, but it will be, just a different, whatever your path is, you'll overcome this stuff.
I've interviewed a couple of people about this. I interviewed Robert Faulkner, who wrote the wonderful book, The Others Within, and he works a lot with this. And so I'm going to say what he said from one of his stories. It's even not what he said. He said that when you this lady had met somebody, and the advice was just to say, like, met somebody inside an entity, whether it was a lizard people or whatever, and her mantra was something like, "I only have love for you. There is only love for you here." Yeah. And just keep on repeating it and keep on like trying to access that love. Just keep on trying to access that love. And I thought, well, if I'm going to have a mantra or a saying to help somebody, I think that's quite a good one
Mm.
in those situations.
There's another tool along those lines which is really powerful, which is Ho'oponopono, which is
Yeah.
Hawaiian magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's
Absolutely. Yeah.
the brief prayer there is, how can you remember how it goes? It's like,
I forgive you. I'm
is that
sorry.
first or it's,
Oh, I didn't know there was an order. Please forgive me.
uh,
I'm sorry.
oh, please
Thank
forgive
you.
me. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry for judging you. I'm sorry,
And
thank you, or
and I
something.
love
But
you.
yeah,
I think it's
um,
those four.
so I love you first. Anyway, people should go and look that up. I've used that one to very great effect, and you can deal with really any kind of negativity with that thing. It's like the universal cleaning solution. It's brilliant.
But it is brilliant, and it's I think the idea was you could pick one of them and just keep repeating it. Yeah,
Mm.
so just activating
I'll just do
gratitude,
the whole list
activating
over and over
love,
again.
activate, yeah, or you do it the whole list repeating,
Mm.
through cycles. But yes, I mean that's very powerful. Yeah.
I once had some external negativity coming my way, and I did that. And I took the dog for a walk up a path with lots of spiky brambles growing across it. And I took my garden shears and I did the Ho'oponopono prayer as I cut back the thorns and took all of the painful, sharp stuff out of the path to clear the path. So I, made my physical activity of maintaining the local footpath into a magical act
Wow.
of freeing the path of these painful things. And I
Hmm.
ended up really getting into a trance. And I found that every time I scratched myself or pricked my finger on a bramble, it was because I'd lost mindfulness with the prayer. I needed to refocus and get back into it. And while
Hmm.
I was in that state, I didn't prick my fingers or get scratched by the all the brambles that I was cutting at all. It
Hmm.
was just like the pain was just a little reminder. Whoops, you've lost your focus a bit there. And I got into a really good trance. It was a lovely, lovely ritual, and it was just a mundane thing you can do with a pair of secateurs and Ho'oponopono and some brambles. You can achieve an awful lot with some quite simple ingredients.
I think so.
You
I
don't need Eye of Newt.
Well, these newts, they're walking around with like, you know, eye patches because somebody took an
Yeah,
eye from them.
I
It's
was
terrible.
terribly disappointed to learn that all of those things were actually names of plants, and that they actually weren't using all of these, just tail of puppy dog and whatever else. That they were just names for the herbs and plants and things.
You've,
So
now you've
yeah,
now
I
you've
do feel
shattered
it. I'm
my you've
relieved for
shattered
the
my
newt
illusion now
population.
as well. I think you could have kept
Yeah,
that for yourself. I'm
sorry.
sorry. I'll have to have a spoiler alert at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking I've got the title, it's going through my head. So the title for our talk is The Man Who Broke Remote Viewing. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh
Uh,
no.
no, you're like that. What I love is
I
what you've
didn't
talked
break
about.
it.
No, no, but clickbait, mate. Clickbait. Come on, let's think
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that.
Okay, okay.
What do you
Actually, I
think?
did break it once.
Go on, tell
Only
all.
slightly. Um, Myself and Josh, my co-conspirator in the creation of Cowboy Remote Viewing, were experimenting with whether or not we could interfere with the remote viewing process remotely. And it's a difficult thing to experiment on ethically because if
Yep.
you tell people that there's interference, if you even if you tell the tasker, who's coming up with the task for the viewers, if you tell them, well, we're going to try and interfere with it, you just do your thing, but we're going to interfere with it,
Mm,
then they know, and then that's mixed up with their intent as they set the task.
mm,
So we happened upon an instance where some people were doing remote viewing live online, and there was a live stream you could join, and the person setting the task didn't know what we were up to, and the viewers didn't know what we were up to, and they still don't, and they never will. So it wasn't something you'd perhaps regard as perfectly ethical, but Josh took the task of influencing the tasker to select a certain class of target, and I went to influence the viewers to describe a certain class of target. And our aim was to shift the entire thing. And what we found was the effect bled out to our students and friends and other colleagues and stuff, and like everybody started drawing the same thing around us. We hadn't really circumscribed the energy very carefully, I guess, and there was sort of this week-long effect where this was cropping up more and more,
mm, mm.
and we had to sort of go and try and do the go and hit Control Z, undo, you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and sort of
yeah.
neutralize that.
But it
Anyway,
is
it
a
was very
fan.
funny, and but it worked,
Yeah.
so we did break remote viewing a little bit.
Okay. Well, I can have the man who broke remote viewing a little bit. It's probably quite
A little bit, yeah, okay, I can
a
deal with
little
that.
bit, just a little bit. Man who
Temporarily.
remote moving, just a little bit. I like that. I think. What do you suggest? And we've talked about like the gods of remote viewing. The
Oh,
cowboys of remote viewing. I mean, we've talked
uh,
about.
your choice of clickbait is between you and God, Richard.
Okay, well, I'll be
It's what
phoning
whatever you can live with.
Mark Zuckerberg later. He's he's the click king. I think the click emperor. But yeah, no. A fantastic talk. And um, yeah, more than I could have hoped for. I could see that we could have another couple of chats.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, so
I would
thank you.
like to. It would be yeah lovely to even if we don't make it a podcast, even if we just have a chat, it'd be really nice. I think it's really valuable to have these sort of exchanges across different practices and worldviews, and it helps us find the truth, doesn't it?
I would love to, like I was saying to Daz, and I said to you on the podcast where you guys talked to me, is I would love to do the opposite. So actually supercharge the remote viewers through the energy work that I
Mm.
do, if that's possible. So
It would
yes,
be really interesting to experiment with it.
so my thing would be about strengthening their center line to the targets, whatever the target is, so that they'll be
Mm.
strong to the target that they're going to get.
Mm.
And then seeing, but I don't know if you can statistically. I'm sure you can get a statistical analysis of are they
Mm.
improving when they're getting that support or are they not?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, we could do that. It would take a lot of data. It's really non-trivial to run those kinds of experiments in a way that's got a decent level of statistical power,
hmm.
but it can absolutely, I mean, we could do it just casually for fun, just to see as a sort of pilot, are we seeing an effect here, or can we be bothered to do the proper study, or
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I
I
think it would
think that would
be,
be interesting. I've got a
mm,
group of like 40 people that would just everybody would just support the project because it's like supporting the energy of the project.
mm.
If there's a
Are
viewing
those
project and they just like
students
they
of
wouldn't
yours
even
for,
know what they're doing. They would just know there's a project and the people need to be strong to it, and you could strengthen people to the project without
oh, I
them.
see. So
So
those are
they'd
all
be
your
blind to what
students
they're
for
doing as well.
the energy work,
Yeah,
then they're not remote viewers.
and they're not remote viewers, but
Okay.
they
Would
would
there
be
be an
blind to it.
ethical would there be an ethical issue with weakening somebody towards a remote viewing target?
You, um, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just not something it doesn't appeal to me. I tend to feel that what you get out, what you give out, you get back. Yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, it's like when you talk badly about somebody, it just brings your whole vibe down, which you
Oh
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You've
yeah.
got to put shit
So,
in order to put shit out, haven't you?
yeah. So, um, yeah, I have like, I have played with it a little bit. Um, and I'm not sure if it was ethical. But I
Hmm.
still,
Because if
um,
this is just a remote viewing target, you're not weakening their health or you're just
no.
weakening their affinity for a particular piece of information, and you're doing so coming from an ethical sort of point of view that this is research project,
You're
that.
strengthening them. You wouldn't weaken them at all. You only strengthen them to be neutral. So
Mm,
actually, whether they hit the target or not, don't hit the target, shouldn't weaken them. So very often, I think this fear of failure, yeah,
mm.
um, kind of messes us up with
Oh
remote
yeah, yeah.
viewing. That's my thing. So
Mm,
you'd just be to have working to have them being really neutral and centered towards whatever they're doing.
mm. It would be great
Um,
if you could come up with a toolkit that we could use as teachers of remote viewing to sort of quickly help people overcome those challenges because we can train people out of it, but it can be an uphill struggle for people. And I do cruel things like I will set somebody a remote viewing task to do, and they'll turn in their first how 8 or 9 or 10 pages, and then you look at it and go, oh, tell me more about this, tell me more about that. They've done 20 pages of work. That's usually the point that you would send them their feedback and do a little bit of an autopsy, a debrief. How do you think it went, and what can we learn from it? And at that point, I just say thanks. That's it.
right.
Here's your next one. No feedback.
Yeah.
Because I think the fear of failure is often tied up with attachment to results, isn't it? And we
Yeah.
need to enjoy the process and engage with the process in the moment and not spare any thoughts for events in the future. We can
Mm.
have our intent, I'm going to hit the target, but we've got to just let it go, haven't we? And just allow it to. So I wonder if your energy strengthening could be used to somehow enable people to more readily fall into that state.
Maybe what we're gonna do, like once I finish this current book that I'm working on, we'll do a toolkit for you. I'll do a
Mm.
toolkit for you for
I
remote
want to do
viewing.
some research as well and sort
Yeah.
of prove what we can do with this and show people the value of it. If indeed it works, we might find that it doesn't make
Yep.
much of a difference.
Yep.
But yeah, it
Yep.
would be really fun to try it out.
Yep. Yep. I'm open
Excellent.
enough to think, well, it might not work. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like that with
Who
every
knows? But
single time I do my energy work. I said, like, it worked last time. It worked the last 100 times, but today it might not.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, cool.
Well, it's the same with remote viewing. The
Exactly
day
the
that
same.
you promise everybody it'll work and you feel strongly how important it is for it to work is the day that it won't. You know.
Yeah. I'm gonna stop recording and have a few words with you afterwards, but I'd like to thank everybody for watching and thank you for sharing. So it's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.